Welcome back to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. Thanks for being here. All right, we've got Tim Shannon, CEO, 24/7 Kid Doc, OTC trading symbol TVMD. All right, Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon.
All right, my pleasure. Yeah, I was looking at your background, kind of diverse. Give our audience how you went from NASCAR to telemedicine. This is wonderful.
Well, they're both quick. Telemedicine is a fast-growing industry, and NASCAR was a pretty fast industry. Spent 20 years giving folks thrills of driving 180 miles an hour around Talladega and Texas and Atlanta and California and up in Concord, New Hampshire, and we had a great time with it and gave a lot of people thrills, and nobody was ever seriously injured. We wrecked some cars, but nobody was ever seriously injured, so we had a great time for a long time.
All right, what got you into telemedicine?
I've got a brother-in-law who owns 3 pediatric offices down in Florida, and he had the bright idea a couple of years back to open them 24/7. And when he did, his revenue was going up 50% per year after 30 years of basically being a pretty stagnant pediatric practice. And that 24/7 idea got me looking into convenience and how, as a community, culture, we've always wanted our convenience. When I grew up, things were closed on Sunday until people started demanding that McDonald's and gas stations were open for our convenience. And doctors have been sort of the last industry to realize this. Normally, if we want to see a doctor, it's between 9 and 5, and if that's not the case, we go to emergency rooms. And so I started looking into that more. I found the telemedicine, a technology that's really been around for some time and still is not being used as easy as we could.
Right. Most of these telemedicine companies aren't generating revenue. How did you figure out to make money on this?
Well, the challenge in telemedicine is reimbursement, like you said. You're exactly right. Trying to figure out how do we get paid. So we actually go after 3 different business models because they are all a challenge right now. The first being Medicaid. Eventually, Medicaid and insurance companies will be all over telemedicine because they don't want to pay the $750 to $2,000 emergency room visits. And it is becoming the case in large parts of the country, but it's still a challenge. So what we do is we do a little bit of Medicaid through putting our telemedicine systems into public schools, into the rural areas like Montgomery County of Georgia. And then we take the long haul of working through the Medicaid. I believe it'll get a lot easier in the years to come, but right now it's a challenge. We also then go after private insurance companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield by putting the telemedicine into daycares like Chappelle Daycare Centers down in Florida. There we go after private insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that is not mandated to pay for telemedicine but does so voluntarily because they realize it saves them money. And then we also go after cash, which is the subscription membership type model of $9.95 a month, where we're providing 24/7 access of pediatricians and nurse practitioners to new parents, people that have their new babies for that first year of life. And what a great gift to give somebody at a bridal shower or baby shower is a year of being able to access a doctor 24/7. We like to say it's like having a doctor in the family. And if you remember when we had our kids and they were young, we were pretty paranoid at 2 o'clock in the morning and probably had a lot of calls to people I didn't need to make if I had this service.
I bet. All right, Ed Baxter, my co-host here, has got a question for you.
I don't know. I think that first question depends, or statement depends on which kid it was. If it was the third one, it was like, he'll be all right.
Well, that's correct. We none of us want our kids to die on our watch. And if you and I get a fever at our age, we first think it's cancer and we're dying. But next, we're going to wait 2 weeks before we do anything about it. But if your kid gets sick on a Saturday at 2 a.m., most of us, especially those youngsters, and like you say, especially the first kid and even the second kid, we're going to find some solution. And if I had an ability to call a doctor to be able to look on a screen and be able to give some advice from him that, no, you don't have to go to the emergency room, or, look, this is just a simple thing, we can see him Monday in the office, that would have been a great asset. It's sort of like, and I did have that, actually. It was having a doctor in the family.
Tell me about the difference between you and anybody else out there when it comes to diagnosis and really market penetration. How do the users of your product get their hands on it faster than anybody else? Is it faster, easier, and cheaper?
The biggest thing we've done is that telemedicine as an industry has been into the pediatric side of schools and and taking care of these kids with these big telemedicine systems that are on these trays, like the hospital carts,
Right.
like the crash cart. Let's say, someone's having a heart attack, we get the crash cart. Well, that cart is a beautiful cart. Don't get me wrong. It's got a great tray. It's got loads of storage areas. It's got the blue paddles. But those carts cost $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a piece. Same thing with telemedicine. They're producing carts at $35,000, $40,000, $45,000 a piece. What we did is we went in and we said, that doesn't make any sense. The doctor is not touching that cart in telemedicine. He's at his office or sometimes at his home, simply looking at a screen of the images coming through his screen live. He doesn't necessarily need all those functionality. If we can break this down to something more inexpensive with simply a great otoscope, a great stethoscope, a great dental camera to look inside the throat, then we don't need all those other extra items, and we got the system down to about $5,000. So now we go to schools and say, we understand your budgets are tough. We understand you can't afford $50,000 systems, and we get it that grants aren't there anymore. We'll provide this hardware to you for free if you give us access to your students and you help us market to their parents to get them enrolled.
How do you market to the parents?
Well, that's guerrilla marketing. Most of it is going to things like the trunk or treat, going to the big jamborees, going to those types of activities, which, that's an investment of time. And eventually we're going to have a series of salesmen out there because I don't look that great in Halloween costumes.
Well, it's one of those things where you have to be there. My wife's a teacher, and I understand it. There's every sort of vendor you can think of that comes to a school trying to sell them something and trying to get them to adopt some particular product. One thing that's interesting about what you do, and I think that is a function of the changes we've seen that allows this to occur, is the technology you talked about. The new sensors, whether it's blood glucose monitoring from a distance, is whether it's looking at other different types of vital signs, are the things that drive telemedicine and allow you to create a much more cost-effective application that can be used in the school. Can you kind of give us some information about that?
Well, the cost-effective. To be able to go to a school and say you don't have to wait 2 years to be able to install this telemedicine to bring that type of service to your students. Like you said, a great example we have in Montgomery County is a young man that had to drive to Emory once every quarter with his family, and it'd be a 3-day ordeal simply to sit in front of a cardiologist so he could see his color, so he could talk to him, ask him a couple questions. It was a 10-minute call, and the kid was going back home. He does that now through telemedicine, and the family doesn't have to take 2 days off. And the same thing with being able to use telemedicine in schools. It keeps students in class, which raises graduation rates. Graduation rates are what all these superintendents, and that's who we have to go after also. This is superintendents. From the school systems that there's a lot of people, a lot of politics. But we go after the superintendents, and then we go down from there. It's still a long process, with the time they take off for summer, et cetera. But we think the cost effectiveness is that this doesn't cost the school a thing. There's no extra liability. And in many cases, we're bringing physician capabilities to kids that don't even see doctors.
Exactly. I have 3 children of my own. I can remember many a day going to the school nurse office when they had a temperature or a sore throat, whether it was strep or whatever it was, and having to deal with that. It obviously would have been a lot more, I think it's been a lot more efficient for a remote physician to be able to diagnose that based on the symptoms they've seen and the vitals they've gotten to help that nurse do a better job of determining whether they just have a fever or they have strep or something else that might be contagious.
That's exactly right. And it's not for everything. There are many things you cannot do with telemedicine. But children there are some pretty basic things with the sore throats, the earaches. 75% they say they can do with telemedicine. And the kids' graduation rates go up, but also the parents. Think about a parent that goes into the office at 1 o'clock and asks the boss, do you mind if I leave to go get my kid, take him to the doctor, but I'll be back. I'm really going to try to get back. We all know they never come back. And the boss doesn't like it. Whether it's the woman or man, it doesn't matter. That hurts their job career. And many times, at this rate, you can go in and say, do you mind if I just go online and close my door and for 15 minutes participate in this online live HIPAA-compliant video conference? And the boss is going to say, heck yes, 15 minutes. And she or him can pick up that Tamiflu or that Z-Pak on the way home, and you cut a whole day off the whole process and forget about the next day going to that doctor's office where, guess what? You're sitting in an office with all sorts of germs that came from the people that were just sitting at that table before you.
That is a big plus for me. I want to talk about market penetration, where you're finding success, and what are some of the challenges that you've overcome in taking the business from concept to where it is now.
Well, we're still basically a startup company. We've been at this about a year since the NASCAR company closed, and part of that is what you're talking about, market penetration. 10, 15 years ago, NASCAR was a huge success on all levels, and today it hasn't been able to maintain that success. The market penetration is difficult when you've got a teledoc, for instance, that has 22 million members and is a $2 billion stock. They've been out there being able to advertise now $32 million a year. So what we'd have to do is the grassroots. But going to schools, what we have the capability is, instead of individually going to each one of the parents and marketing them with pay-per-click or Facebook, we have a school system that is getting something for free if they commit to allow us to not only go to those events I said, but also do the emails, do the Facebooks, put flyers in the kids' stuff they take home, sometimes use the robocalls. And it is grassroots marketing, but we eventually want to be able to compete in some ways in the pay-per-click, but more on a regional basis where we don't have to advertise all of the states, because right now parity laws are very important in telemedicine. To get that market penetration, you got to be able to get paid the same thing for a telemedicine visit that you do for a office visit.
Tim,
and that's true in 30 states.
Let's stop right there. Take a break, and I'm going to hear more on the other side. All right?
Great, Mike.
All right, we'll be right back with Tim Shannon, CEO, 24/7 Kid Doc, symbol on the OTC TVMD segment, brought to you by the Vitamin Patch. We'll be right back, and don't forget, click on our podcast. They're all over the place. Welcome back to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorby, your host. Thanks for joining us. All right, we've got Tim Shannon, CEO, 24/7 Kid Doc, symbol on the OTC TVMD. All right, Tim, when we left off, we were talking about the 600-pound gorilla in the room, the market penetration, and I'm not IBM. I face a lot of the same issues that you do. I'm not public though, so you have some more issues to deal with behind the scenes than most people really give you credit for. Talk to me about taking your company from concept to a bigger market share where the shareholders are happy with you. They believe in you, and they believe in the vision of where you're going. And tell us, where are you going?
Thanks, Michael. And by the way, before my time at NASCAR, I did spend time with IBM down in Tampa. And you're right. This is a lot different than IBM. We don't have those $50 billion in revenue to pull from, and the market penetration where the real pot of gold is going to be when folks start using telemedicine from home and stop going to doctors and stop using urgent cares as much.
Yep.
And without having zillions of dollars to be able to market to those people, and being a grassroots company like us, we believe the way to get to those people is to first go to schools and get thousands and thousands of kids and give the school no downside. You have no liability. This is bringing services and health care to your students, which is part of your responsibility to keep these kids safe. And obviously, if there's an emergency, this doesn't come in. But if we can get the schools and be their vendor in their schools, once this does hit the home market, and it's going to hit the home market, as you know, by companies like TytoCare. Just did another $25 million raise. They raised $17 million from Walgreens. They've got a tool that can fit in your hand that can give all those vital signs we talked about with our $5,000 equipment that was $35,000 just 2 years ago, and still by many down to $500 or maybe even less. That home market, we believe if we have those kids in school, we have a much better chance, if not the best chance, to be able to tag onto that home market and to grab that market share. Without that, you're right. It's very possible we remain a relatively small player out there, because the big guys know about this. The hospitals are not going to miss what they missed in urgent care. A lot of business people own urgent cares because hospitals just ignored it and missed it. Those guys have zillions of dollars in their pocket. Healthcare, as we all know, it doesn't have the economic downturns that we deal with in all these other marketplaces. And I believe those guys will come in and just rule the place. But if we can get ourselves to be a $12 million, $7 million, $9 million player, the investors will be happy when they come in. And, for us to be at 2.5 cents, I certainly think we have a better chance of getting to 25 cents than IBM does to get into 1,700.
Right. I believe you. And actually, the bid on this looks to me like, okay, I get it. Here's the question I've got. What's next? What are you going to do next with the company to make you, the humanitarian effort that you're pushing through, because it's a business, yes, and the shareholders happy? What's going to happen next?
We're going to have some strong revenue coming in. And by strong, I don't even mean millions right now, but to show that we can bring in a couple $100,000 and that we can then produce some real happy customers that can give some great references and that we can multiply that. This is a very scalable business. One of the challenges we had in our NASCAR school that we were partnered with Dale Jarrett and Brett Favre, and by the way, they're still partners of this venture, both of those gentlemen, was scalability. You can't build another Talladega if you want to put one up in South Dakota. But there are schools and pediatricians and pediatric offices all over this country. And we can go to these telemedicine companies now that are having these types of problems where there are 100 telemedicine companies. And even Teladoc, the biggest of us all, is losing $30 million a quarter. So there's a lot of opportunity for a great idea if we can figure out how to get the gold up. A lot of us are striking down at the ground and coming up with nothing. We know there's gold down there, but how do you find it?
What's your penetration here in Texas?
What's the penetration that our next strategy?
In Texas, I mean, are you able to get into the Texas market?
I'm not in Texas, but Texas, as you know, is a big state right now because there was a big suit just won, and it was at Doctors on Demand, who's owned by Dr. Phil, and they went after Texas saying that you do have to pay for our telemedicine visits the same as office, and that we don't have to meet first with an individual before we can have a telemedicine relationship. Right now, we're primarily Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Southeast, but I'd love to get into Texas, but we're going to have to grow. We're going to have to need more people, et cetera. So I have no penetration in Texas now.
Got it. All right. Well, let's see if we can change that, Tim.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. All right, we've got to run. I've got another segment coming up, but I really appreciate that. Tim Shannon, CEO, 24/7 Kid Doc. Quick, I'm going to let you have the word on the contact info.
TVMD symbol 24/7. The number's 247kiddoc.com. 247kiddoc.com. Tim Shannon, 844-303-8006. 844-303-8006. Thank you very much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Tim.
Goodbye, sir.
All right. Tim Shannon, CEO, 24/7 Kid Doc, symbol TVMD. Don't forget to catch the podcasts on all of our shows. Segment has been brought to you by Tycon Partners. We're going to pause briefly and bring in David Williams and talk about what's going on in the stock market, Bitcoin, with PageTrader.com.